Hey guys, what's up, foes? Okay, so I'm making this video because I just realized that I missed a ton of comments on a lot of videos over the last 2 months, and I apologize for that. Life got in the way, then winter hit really hard, and there was all kinds of problems. So I just wanted to kind of make this video as like a little summary to all the comments, and also mention about the video that I just posted that was actually made in November. It was supposed to be a test video after all the changes, and it was a complete nightmare. It was a nightmare because I had a problem that I didn't know about, and it skewed the output or the outcome of the tests. Totally ruined it. The test in the woods in November that I did, that I just released now, I did it for entertainment use only, so just keep in mind that everything that I'm saying in that video, don't even pay attention to it. None of it's accurate, because once I got back, I realized that I had a problem with my rear wheel. It was severely bound up, and it wasn't even turning easy. It was almost like I had my foot on the brake the whole time, but I didn't. Something happened, let me show you. Something happened in the... It was either the brake caliper was not on the slider properly, or it was something to do with a kinked axle, or it could have been a spacer problem in here. I don't know, but all I know is that when I got back here to the shop, I pushed the bike up on its stand and I could barely move the wheel. I'm like, holy crap, I just went through all that for nothing. So the reason why I was doing the tests, by the way, was because I was testing the gearing. If you remember, I was trying to find the right gearing for this bike that would make it so that it was kind of I was looking for that sweet spot. There are people that are riding this bike as a dual sport bike, and there are people that are treating it as a strictly off-road dirt bike. Unfortunately, the suspension is by far the most hindering thing about this bike. I want to be really clear, and I had mentioned this before, that this bike will severely limit you from getting better with the suspension the way it is. Even if you're a heavier guy, particularly people under 150 pounds. So I want you to understand that if you buy this bike and you're going to ride the hell out of it, I would highly recommend that you keep in the back of your mind that this bike is only going to let you get so far. And then what it's going to do is when something happens and you're in an off-road situation, you're going to get violently woken up with the response of this suspension to something that you're doing that you otherwise would not get on a bike that had suspension, proper suspension set up for your weight, your riding style, and sprung for your, valved for your type of riding and your skill level. So when people get on a bike and they say, oh, this suspension's great, two things you got to keep in mind with that person that says that. One, what is their skill level, and what are they actually doing on the bike? Because most people that says, oh, the suspension's good, they're sitting on the bike, squishing the bike down. That doesn't tell you anything about the suspension. So I just wanted to kind of emphasize that again, that this bike will limit you, and you could otherwise be getting better. So don't treat this bike like, oh, I got a dirt bike now I'm just going to try to get better. Unfortunately, it's only going to carry you so far, and then it's going to limit you as to how much better you can get. And that is why when you hear me on the bike riding and I'm expressing all these things like, what the hell was that, or whatever, it's because this bike is reacting in ways that it just shouldn't. It's massive deflection when it hits bumps and rocks. Small rocks are so violent. I weigh 140 pounds now, and if anybody is in my weight range, you're going to experience the same thing with stock suspension. The rear end with the shock swap out is much better than it was, but the front end still needs to be addressed. We're not talking about spring rate problems. We're talking about valving issues. The rebound is just too slow, and slow rebound means that the fork and the shock can't come back out quick enough to grab the next bump. So instead, what it does is the wheel is still in from the suspension being compressed, it doesn't come back out, which means it's not making contact with the ground. And if you're in any kind of lean angle or in a corner, your front wheel is not making contact with the ground. So what ends up happening is the whole bike hops to the left. If you're taking a right corner, it goes out from under you. It's just a mess. And I've smashed my knees on the handlebars because of it. And I get really pissed off because I know how it should perform and it's not doing that. On the good side though, let's talk about the upgrades and the stuff that I did. I'll make this is more or less a summary, okay? Tire changes, huge difference, okay? The tires that it came with are really kind of terrible. These are, I think they call them IMEX. IMEX tires are Rocky Mountain ATV MC. Unfortunately, I had to get the exact same physical size tires as far as the ratio goes because I couldn't find them any. I really wanted a sidewall that was a little taller, but I couldn't find it. So I did have a question too about rim size changes. I would definitely not recommend you change rim sizes. You change rim sizes, you're changing the geometry of the bike. You're changing the distance between the tire and the swing arm crotch. You are changing a lot of other things too. You're screwing up the speedometer calibration, and the odometer won't be right after that. You don't want to do that. So just keep the rims on it. Oh, I wanted to mention also too that I put the old rim on my truing stand. The rim was so badly bent from not being trued from the factory that I couldn't even fix it. I fixed the hop, but it was out of whack horizontally, which I fixed, but the bead area was so bent in a couple of places I couldn't fix it. So it was never going to be right. I just bought a pre-laced rim, put the wheel on it, new tires, front and rear, same factory size. I have to say, despite the fact that the suspension is fighting me, the tires now allow me to just rail into berms and flat terrain, and I just stuff the bike into flat ground and make a berm out of nothing. That was cool. That was a cool upgrade that really worked for the bike, and it also makes the bike perform better in the conditions that you would expect to ride it in. Okay, so let's talk about the carburetor situation. Okay, the carburetor, I had another question today. Well, actually it was probably 3 months ago, but I answered it today. Sorry about that, guys. Everybody said to me, which nibby size should I get? 24, 26, or 30? None. Unfortunately, the nibby carb does not solve the hesitation problem. If you have that hesitation problem that I had, the hesitation problem happens when you give it a really lot of throttle at one time. It drove me crazy because throttle response is extremely important in an off-road situation. You need power when you need it, immediately. And instead of this bike giving you the power that it had when you stab the throttle, you not only don't get the power, the bike almost stalls. And no matter what jetting change I did, I couldn't get it. So the cure was a 30 millimeter accelerator pump type of carb. Accelerator pump, if you're not familiar with it, it uses two cables. It uses the standard cable up to pull the slide up, which controls engine speed, of course, right? And then the second cable is for the accelerator pump, which squirts a little bit of fuel directly into the throat of the carburetor every time the throttle is turned. The combination of the 30 millimeter, which really is too big typically for a 150cc bike, it should be around the 26 to 27 millimeter, but it works. But the combination of that, the accelerator pump, and the fact that the engine Actually, I didn't even change the jets now that I think of it. The jetting that came with this is the jetting I left in it because that's the first thing I tried. And I immediately noticed a difference the first time I started it up. It was stone cold and I could give it throttle. I couldn't do that before. I changed jets on the Nibby and the stock Carb 1,000 times and never could get it to work right. So I just wanted to let you know that this is the cure for the hesitation problem. You can see that I have a non-stock intake manifold. I bought 3 intake manifolds, thinking I would have to modify them in one way or the other. I didn't. This particular one, see if I can link it in the description, worked out about as perfect as you could possibly think that it could. It's offset, off-center. Okay, so if you look, I don't know if you can see this, but it's not on the center line of the bike. It actually leans to the left side of the bike, leans over here. What that does though is it pushes the carburetor further to the left side, which really helps with choke access when you're sitting on the bike. And what it really helps with even more is it places the cables, since there's 2 on here, it places the throttle cable on the left side of the backbone of the frame, and it places the accelerator pump cable on the opposite side. So in the video, if you watch when I have all the tanks off on the last video and you look straight down at it, you can clearly see that one cable is on one side of the frame backbone and the other one's on the opposite side, which is about as much as you could ask for. Right here, this area, let me see if I can get you a shot of that. See that area right there? That's the accelerator pump assembly right there. That's what squirts the gas up into the throat of the carburetor. I'm not a fan of pod filters. I don't think anybody is. They're fine for road bikes, but they're not that great for off-road because they just don't filter the fine particles. So I will be putting some kind of filter sock on this. What was the other? Oh, the other major thing that needed to be accomplished, and this is the other reason why this intake manifold is important, is that if you don't use the intake manifold that I have and you use the stock one, you have to cut the fins on the engine to fit this in. And even if you do that, then you got the problem of this overflow or the drain hose sitting on the hot engine. All of that is no good. So this particular intake manifold, like I said, solves all these problems in one shot, and it's a bolt-on fix. It's not made for this. I just experimented. So that is the fix. A 30mm carb is pretty big for a small engine like a 150, but it works fine. The other modification that was well worth it was now the modified gas tank with the petcock, and now it has reserve. So that's huge. You can see I capped the original place. That was kind of necessary that was capped, because if you were to try to modify that and utilize that hole, you have to take that insert, the original insert, out. And if you did that, then the hole that you made by taking it out would be too big for the new petcock to cover. Well, let's see, what else? Maybe I should hold on to this camera for a couple of minutes more. Okay, so tires, the binding of the wheel was causing the problem, so the test information in that video that I did was completely invalid. Carburetor changes, gearing changes. I had mentioned about the gearing change. This bike, I'm looking for that sweet spot. 16-tooth sprocket. I'm going to retest the 15. I know the 15 works great, but I still wanted to see if I could get a little bit more out of the bike and a little bit more out of the transmission. So I'm going to redo that test with the 16, and then I'm going to redo it again with the 15. Now that my wheels aren't all bound up, then I'll have my opinion on that will stand, and I'll feel confident in saying, okay, this is good for that, and that's good for this. If you're doing strictly off-road, you might want to do this. If you're doing on and off-road, mostly on, you might want to do this. I have no idea as of right now where that stands. I will say that with the carburetor change and the accelerator pump, there's a bit more tension on the on the throttle. It has much more tension. But as much as noticeable as it was when I first did it, I don't notice it at all when I'm riding, which is great. The cable is longer than I wanted it to be, but it worked out pretty good. You can see the cables here, and you can also see that I'm moving it down there. So I just kind of ran it through the headlight area out here on the triple clamps, and then underneath. That's the junction point of where the two cables split to the carb. What else? Modifications to the grip warmers are much better. There's a video on that. That's part of the series videos. I think I do 2 or 3 modifications per video. It took forever to film it, but I think it was worth it. The cure, I'm not sure if I did cover this, but I did, in the video that I did the grip warmers, that I showed it with when I put the glue on and everything, I didn't like that at all after that. They didn't hold up the way they should have. The biggest problem too is that I wanted to use a throttle tube on the non-throttle side because I wanted the insulation on both grips to be the same. Because I'm tired of grip warmers where the throttle side is always nice and warm and the non-throttle side is colder than it because most of the heat is getting radiated into the handlebar. I put a throttle tube on this side, but I cut the cam system off in that video. And I put insulating tape on the bar first and slid the throttle tube over, and it didn't really move, which was great. By the time I assembled everything over again and I safety wired it, these things are tight as hell. They really, I've always used safety wires on grips. That's an old motocross trick, like to safety wire them down. All the pros use it too. I've used it since I was a kid. I always put at least 2, sometimes 3. I show that in the video how I do that on one of those videos. Point being is the grip wasn't turning. The grip was bonded to the throttle tube, and the throttle tube was turning on the bar. I took all that apart. If I didn't already mention this, and what I ended up doing is took all this off. I took the insulating tape off. I slid the throttle tube on. I drilled 2 small holes, 1/8-inch holes, one here and one back here. And I put an aluminum rivet right through it, and it bonded it directly to the bar, and that is never going to turn now. Now I reassembled everything. I used the 3M glue that I used in the other video, the Super 77 stuff, which is amazing. Contact adhesive. I bonded the grip warmer elements directly to the throttle tubes on both sides, and those aren't going anywhere. So all of the radiating heat energy is now being reflected from the plastic because it can't get into the metal, so it has to basically come out towards the grips. These grips get so hot on high you can't even keep them on high. Your hands actually get too hot. I mean, like tingly kind of hot. So I just put a high and low switch here. Center is off, up is high, down is low. The other switch is for the emergency lighting. Okay, so, oh yeah, shift lever. Change the shift lever out to a longer shift lever. It's about a 1/2 inch, I think, longer. But when I did the test ride, again in that video, that was another thing that was not calibrated yet. The height of it wasn't set right. I couldn't feel anything. I couldn't even feel the brake. You know, I was like, it was a mess. That whole test ride was it looked like the Benny Hill show. It was awful. So between the tire upgrades, the new rim that doesn't wobble anymore, the carburetor change took care of the hesitation. The gearing change, I think the 16 will be okay, but I'll test it again. If not, the 15 will certainly be okay for off-road, but I really would like to use the 16 because you get a higher top speed, but more importantly, you got a much broader range in first gear, and all the gears now kind of step up a notch. I did have several questions though about the why didn't I make the gearing changes with the rear sprocket? I didn't make the gearing changes with the rear sprocket because there's such an extreme that I had to change, like the original 14 tooth sprocket was so far off in my opinion. It was so overly low geared that it was like I had to make a huge jump, and one tooth on the front on the countershaft sprocket is equal to about 3.5 on the rear. So if I made those changes with the rear, I would have had to make an extreme change. And because the rear sprocket is like almost a 3.5 to 1 versus the front, I might have had to buy 6 sprocket sizes just to get it right. I would say that if you have to make a major change in final gearing, when I say final gearing, I mean chain sprocket gearing, not transmission gearing. I would say that if you have to make major changes or significant changes, you're going to make that change with the countershaft front sprocket. If you only want to fine tune it, then you can screw around with the rear. But just remember, it's generally a 3.5 to 1 difference between the front and rear sprocket. So that's why I made the changes with the front, because I had to make major changes. Like I had to really significantly change it. So I didn't want to screw around with the rear. Now, of course, by increasing the size of the front sprocket, the countershaft sprocket, it does make some possible problems. For one, if you're using the stock chain and it's the stock size, obviously if you change the front sprocket to a larger sprocket, that means that this wheel has to be adjusted forward. Well, what I found is I couldn't really do the adjustments quite the way I wanted to at first. Now I can, because I think the chain might have stretched just a tad, but I couldn't get the second lock nut in there. And that was fine, because the truth is, guys, is that this chain adjuster doesn't do a damn thing once these nuts are tight. Once the axle nut is tight, this doesn't do anything. It's just initially to move it. I also had a question like, how the hell do you adjust these chain adjusters if the bolt that goes into the swing arm isn't threaded in? You just have a wrench on this nut. These two nuts have to be separated, and you basically you hold this one steady as you turn this one against the swing arm, and it pushes the axle block back, which adjusts the chain. These bikes are really temperamental on the chain adjusters too. It's hard to get that happy medium. I did notice that when it looks like it's too loose, it's way too loose, and when it looks like it's snug, it's too tight when the suspension compresses. So just, make sure you got some slack. That's about right there for this bike. So anyway, that's what I found. What else? I think we covered mostly everything. I don't think I'm going to make any adjustments either to the muffler. It is louder than it was before, so I might repack it, but I'm not going to change the outlet, because I'll probably have to change the jetting if I do that. And now that I got this carburetor, the accelerator pump carb, I don't think I'm going to mess with it. It's finally running much better than it was before when it comes to throttle response. Now I can stuff it into berms. And a combination of that with the tire changes and a trued up wheel, I trued up both of them, I can take a flat corner at speed and just, like I said, stuff it right into the corner, and it'll hold its ground now, because the wheels and the tires are actually, respectable. Unlike the stock ones, those things were all over the place. The front wheel on the front tire on the stock one was just, it was a drifter. Again, all these little things that I'm talking about, they're not working to the advantage of the beginner. To an experienced rider, you're going to know, well, that isn't right. you know that it's not right. But for somebody starting off, you might not know that, and then you're going to get to a level where where the bike is not doing you any favors. Now, I don't think this bike, even if the suspension was set up right, is good for somebody to really start to get good on it. The reason why is this whole geometry thing is different than a normal bike. This horizontal engine, it changes the distance between the seat and the pegs. This distance is much smaller than it would be on a bike that had a vertical cylinder. Like on the 250 version of this bike, which is ironically a 223cc bike, that bike has a much longer distance here. And I remember Mike Festiva talking about it. He likes that 250 better, but I haven't been able to find that 250, and it doesn't matter. I'm not I'm not buying into these bikes anymore. Not made by Zumav. They do have some quality stuff, but some of their decisions are just, I just completely disagree with it. And the fact is that most of the time these bikes are being purchased by beginners, and the beginners don't know any better. So that's kind of why I'm making these videos. So at least, you know, I'm telling you this for your benefit, that this bike could actually hinder you and make you so you don't feel as confident because the way the bike responds to certain terrain. And what I really would love to do is, once this bike is complete, I got to strip all the paint off of this thing in the sandblasting machine. I have to fix the peg mounts, are all worn out. They have to be welded and then ground back to factory spec with new pegs. But anyway, this is going to be stripped back. This project is huge. This project is going to be a very different looking KDX when it's done. It will not be green. It has a very high-end Kayaba fork, a high-end, what they call the Triple S Kayaba fork, which came off a KX 450. High-end suspension. Geez, where's the shock? I can't remember where I put all the stuff. But anyway, yeah, so a lot of changes to the KDX, and the reason why I'm mentioning the KDX right now is because I would love to show you guys how I can take a race bike that's set up for me with good suspension and bring this bike and this bike to the same location and film from an outside perspective and watch how I can totally bomb through horrendously rough terrain and keep my line and blow through sections that would make this bike cringe. And that's kind of what I want to show you, so that you understand that you can only grow so much on this bike in terms of skill. And most of that is due to the way they set the suspension up from the factory. I'm going to test the 16-tooth sprocket now that everything is working the way it should. And a combination of all the things that I talked about, tire changes, carburetor changes, so the hesitation's not there anymore. I think we'll have a really good idea by the time this test is done, which sprocket might be best for the conditions. And I'm really hoping that I can make the 16-tooth sprocket work for everything. But I really would love to show you what a bike like a KDX or something that's set up for my weight, my riding style, versus a bike that isn't. You would not believe the difference. It is the difference between bombing through a section. I wish, you know, if I could show you, I don't know if you guys are into this stuff, but when you look at any video, whether it's hard enduro, although hard enduro speeds are much lower than regular enduro, or hare scrambles, if you guys watch hare scrambles on YouTube, any kind of pro hare scramble, a lot of the pro races have amateurs riding with them. Even local stuff. Even if you look at, like, I'm in New England, so we have NETRA, New England Trail Riders Association. If you look at any NETRA videos on YouTube, you're going to see a mixture of novices, which have black backgrounds on their plates, amateurs, which are the next level up, which have yellow backgrounds on their plates, or experts that have white backgrounds on their plates, and then AA. So novices are C's or D's, amateurs are B riders, experts are A riders, and red plate backgrounds are AA or pro. Take a look. There's plenty of footage out there of a pro or an expert rider, so a white background plate rider, which is A, or a red background plate rider, which is AA. Take a look at them go through a section and then watch a novice go through it. A novice, not only because of their lower skill level, but the pro and expert riders have those suspension systems on their bikes tailored to what they're doing at the speeds that they're riding and their skill level. That makes a big difference, and you can see them just bombing through sections where you can't, like a lower skilled rider with suspension that's not set up for them, they don't know any better. And I wish I could capture that. You know, when I get this bike ready, I would show you an A/B comparison that if I ride this bike after riding that bike for a month, I'll be completely lost on this bike because I know what the bike is capable of doing because I've raced this bike and I've ridden it really, really hard. And it would just be nice to show people because there's no footage out there. I don't see anybody making footage that has, I wouldn't say relevant value. There are relevant videos, but there's just so much misinformation out there and it drives me crazy, and it's almost something that I want to just stay away from. But I'm really trying to come across as trying to be an information source, not a know-it-all. I'm far from that, you know. So I wanted to point this stuff out because if I could get any of you on, after you rode a bike that's not set up for you, if I could get you on a bike that was set up for you, I think you would come back after a 10-minute ride and go, holy crap, what a difference, you know? It makes that much of a difference. And like I said earlier, if you could have a bike that had a really great engine or a really great suspension and you could only pick one, suspension would always be the thing that you would want to pick. Because you could take a bike with a super weak engine and beat the hell out of it and ride it wicked fast, not because of engine speed, but just because you can carry so much more speed. It would be so much more predictable in really terrible terrain. Anybody can do well in a straight line on smooth terrain, but that's not what, you know, performance bikes are all about. And I do think that the Storm could be a lot better than it is, you know, and it's just the way it is. You know, they make them this way, and honestly, I don't think the manufacturers care, and I don't think they even know the difference, to be honest with you. So that's why I'm making these videos, to see what I can do to tweak them enough. They're never going to be to the level of, you know, the high-end suspension I'm going to have on this bike, on the KDX, but it wouldn't take much to get them to be better. And a valving change on the front end and a shock swap on the rear, or a valving change on the rear end too, but it's just easier just to swap the shock out. But for the front end, there's not really many options for this. Like, I can't put the inverted fork from, those are 48 millimeter, I can't put them on this bike. And the stock, believe it or not, I was actually gonna experiment, but I can't. The stock suspension, let me get this fork. The stock fork. This is the stock fork on the KDX. This is a traditional fork though, it's not an inverted fork, but the stock fork on the KDX far exceeds the performance of these inverted forks on this bike. I really wish that these would fit the triple clamps just so I could prove a point, but they're not even close. These are 43 millimeter. I think these are 49. They're not even close. They won't clamp down. But even these simple cartridge forks, they're a standard fork, a conventional fork, they would smoke these things. Like, this KDX was known to go at speed through the most brutal terrain, rock gardens, and this suspension would absorb the stuff so much, it was almost like it wasn't even there. Where these forks suffered badly is if you try to motocross the bike, or you try to get aggressive in whoops, jump landings, or jumps in general, they were not designed for that. They were designed for off-road use in, you know, in really rugged terrain. But if you started to try to hair scramble them, and there was motocross sections in the hair scrambler race, forget it. This suspension wouldn't cut it. But if I could get the performance, or even half the performance of what I had on these stock fork tubes on the KDX, and make that happen on this with the existing one, oh man, it'd be way more than enough. I'd be more than satisfied, and I think all of you would be more than satisfied with performance like that. With that said, I'm gonna end the video here. Thanks for watching again, and I am going to follow up with the next tests off-road with the 16-tooth sprocket and then I will swap that out to a 15 to see where we stand. Okay guys, thanks very much.